Hi guys, it's Andy from Man City Fan TV. Well, this video has been brought about because of the events that happened this week with FFP, and what we found is lots of people have been asking questions on social media and asking about it and what do we know about it, and so I thought nothing better than to invite Colin Savage back on the channel. Colin, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to tomorrow, but looking forward to this chat as well.
Good, excellent. Well, rather than me try and work my way through it, like I said, we may as well bring Colin back because he's knows far more about it than certainly we do at Man City Fan TV. And don't forget, if you want to know, we're not going to go into the whole background of FFP and things like that. If you want to go back and look at the discussion we had a few months ago with Jonathan Northcroft and Colin, go and check out that video because that goes into all the background to FFP and the legalities of it and the discussion and debate. This one is solely about what's happened this week. Ironically, from straight after when we won the Premier League title Sunday night, there was a statement released in the New York Times, and it was talking about Cfcb. Now, just before I start asking Colin the questions, you might hear either of us referring to Cfcb. Now, some people will understand what that means, others will not have a clue what it is. That's the body within UEFA. They're called the Club Financial Control Body, or CFCB. Their chairman is Jose Narciso da Cunha Rodrigues. It's a Portuguese judge, basically, and within that process, there are two areas. One is the adjudicatory chamber, or the AC. They're the ones who will dish out the punishments, and then there's the investigatory chamber, and this is headed by the chief investigator, as we know, is Yves Leterme. He was the ex-prime minister of Belgium from 2007 to 2011. So if we talk about CFCB, we're talking about the financial area of UEFA that deals with licensing and other areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to set out some questions. We might have some extra questions at the end, but basically the format's going to be this. We're going to have a very quick overview of the FFP timeline and the events very quickly, not in loads of detail, just so that people, if they don't understand it or don't follow what's occurred over the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, Colin's going to quickly sort of brief overview of FFP. We're going to look at when the New York Times article came out on Sunday night by somebody called Tariq Panja, and what was different in that particular article. The media's reporting of these events this week. Then we're going to look at the events surrounding City's robust statement that came out, and certainly the wording and tone has definitely changed this week. And then finally, we'll look at the future of the investigation and potential consequences for Manchester City. So, Colin, first question to you is, please, can you give the viewers, and I know some people on Twitter said it'd be great if you could do a video because they don't fully understand it and what's happening. So would you be able to just briefly give the viewers a quick overview of the FFP timeline?
Yeah, okay. It's fairly straightforward, really. It shouldn't take up too much time. Financial fair play was first talked about in 2009. The regulations were discussed over the course of that season. 2010, it was announced that the regulations were coming into effect, and they first took effect in the 2011-12 season, or financial year rather than season. Most clubs align their financial accounting periods to a season for obvious reasons. So 2011-12, 2012-13 were the first two financial periods assessed by UEFA for the purposes of financial fair play. And as we know now, City failed that first assessment. And I won't go into the detail behind it. I've written about this on the Bolt from the Blue website, if anyone wants to read it, but it's hugely complicated. City were hoping to rely on a provision within the regulations to avoid punishment, but because of UEFA changed those halfway through the process, they weren't able to do that. So we failed FFP, and it's quite relevant that it's just 5 years ago, almost to the day, that UEFA published its sanctions against Manchester City. So we were fined, some of which was redeemable if we met met the conditions, and we had certain other conditions attached to the next couple of years. Now, as far as UEFA are concerned, we met those requirements, and since then we've been compliant with financial fair play. And if we think about that May 2014 time scale, or when the sanction, that's very, very relevant to what's happened here.
Okay. So, Colin, can I ask you just to sit back just a little bit, only because I'm just catching there a little. Yep. Brilliant, that's better. I'm just catching half of your head on there. Okay, so there's a quick timeline of the FFP events surrounding Manchester City. So, what we knew was back in March that there was going to be this potential investigation into some of those events going back a few years, a number of years, nearly 5 years, in fact. And then on Sunday night we had, it came out late Sunday night, was this New York Times article by Tariq Panja. And that came out, and initially reading through it, I was thinking, well, this is just regurgitating basically everything that we already know about it. But what was different in that article, Colin?
Well, what was different was it seemed to have emanated from a source within the club financial control body. And just to add to your explanation, which was a good one, as you said, there are two chambers. The investigatory chamber is, if you like, the lower one that carries out the day-to-day work. The adjudicatory chamber is the higher chamber, and that takes very serious decisions. You can compare it to perhaps like a magistrate's court and a crown court, where a magistrate's court will hear cases on a day-to-day basis, and if they think they can't punish the potential punishment or the crime is serious enough, they will refer that to the Crown Court. And that seems to be what was going on in this case. So what the New York Times statement was saying, according to a source that Tariq Panja seemed to have, was that the investigatory chamber had concluded its investigation, which started in March this year, and was likely to recommend, or minded to recommend, to the adjudicatory chamber that City suffer a 12-month ban from European competition. The adjudicatory chamber has to make that decision, and that may take many weeks to come to fruition. But it did, following all the speculation we've seen and some of the misreporting, because we had back in the back end of last year, when the Der Spiegel articles first appeared, we had Martin Ziegler in the Times basically saying that UEFA had convicted us, but when clearly, in the hindsight of events, that was nowhere near the case. And this is why you've always got to be careful of media reports, because they do tend to jump on things and sensationalize them, maybe deliberately, maybe they do it not understanding the full impact of what they've been told. And then others pick up on it. And of course, the rest of the media just try and spin it even a little bit more. So they all try and put their own spin on it. I think the difference of the New York Times story was this seemed to be very reliably sourced from within the investigatory chamber.
Which is interesting because if we just go back to sort of you saying, you know, there seemed to be a source that is leaking this type of information. If you go on and look at the UEFA Club Financial Control Body's publications about its format, its structure, its rules and regulations, Article 10 on confidentiality states, members of the CFCB ensure complete confidentiality of all facts and refrain from divulging the contents of deliberations. That is a clear standard statement in CFCB's, you know, policies under confidentiality. Now, somebody has leaked something against what their own Article 10 confidentiality rules state. So, you know, it's interesting, and we know that does go on, and we know that happens. You've got to ask yourself why. Why are they releasing it? Why are they giving the likes of Tariq Panja or somebody, you know, this type of information? It's also interesting when you read, and this has been ongoing, it's not just happened this week, but when you read the rest of Matt Lawton and all the others who are reporting on the New York Times article, one word keeps coming up all the time when they talk about Der Spiegel, and that is leaked. Not hacked, leaked. They keep using these leaked documents. So that suggests that Manchester City actually leaked it to whoever and gave it to, the footy leaks. And I just think little tiny things like that. I mean, there's a massive difference between leaked and hacked.
And people don't understand this. That's quite right. And I can tell you directly from a source at City, they are using the word hacked. And they have been quite insistent about this, that the documents have been hacked.
Yeah. Well, this is it. But, I must admit, I've not read anywhere where they've used hacked instead of leaked in these, right across the board of all the media outlets. They keep using this leaked documents to Der Spiegel, leaked document, and you keep thinking, so what you're saying is City are implicit in the giving of these documents to somebody to report back against them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's absolutely...
yeah. If I worked at City, I wasn't happy with something, I leaked a document. It happens in government all the time.
Of course it does.
Government ministers leak documents to the media. Yeah. Because they want to get across their point of view, that perhaps they were defeated in cabinet, want you to get across their own point of view, and that's wrong in itself. Although obviously, whistleblowing can be quite important in uncovering wrongdoing. Let's not be two-faced about that. Yeah. But these are stolen, hacked documents.
Well, let's hope they start using that terminology and not leaked. Yeah. Anyway. So what are your thoughts? The next question was about the media's reporting of this. What are your thoughts of the way it's gone about in general this week?
To step back a little bit, I mean, we're going back to the Der Spiegel art. This has all come about because of the Der Spiegel articles, which appeared late last year. And at the time, I said that the Der Spiegel articles may well have had access to email, but their reporting was very, should we say, focused, a little bit sensationalized. They chose what to write about. They made it potentially sound a lot worse than it could have been. And this week has been, I say, a classic example of how the media work. And there's been a lot of discussion on this over Twitter in the last 48 hours, which unfortunately I've been out of a little bit because my family are over from the USA, so I've been spending time with them. But as we said about when Martin Ziegler first broke the comments of Alexander Seferin, who's the UEFA president, he was asked about City in the light of the Der Spiegel articles, and he said, "We shall look at this concrete case."
Yeah.
Now Ziegler and others took this to mean that UEFA had a concrete case against us. We've said this before. What he meant was this specific case. Yeah. And as we now know, it took about 6 months, 5 months, for that to develop into an official investigation, when we're being assured for all that time that UEFA was investigating us, and they clearly weren't investigating us, but what they were doing was trying to work out what they needed to do.
Yeah.
So that's why you've got to be very careful about the media. And everyone jumped on Ziegler's story, and everyone rewrote it, and everyone added their own little bit of spin to it, because obviously it helps them to be seen they're not directly plagiarizing the story. So it sounds like everyone's got a source and everyone's talking to someone at UEFA, but really they base their articles on this one specific story. The only person who I think emerged with any credit from that was David Conn. And David went back to UEFA, and I know because I've collaborated with David on the story, he is meticulous about getting every detail right. You may not like what he writes, and Miguel Delaney was having a go at me over that. I've not always agreed with what David writes, but I know he is a person of the greatest integrity. And his research is meticulous. And he'd gone to UEFA and asked them what was happening. And UEFA said, "We are not investigating." So all this reporting this week has come from the New York Times story. Yeah. So everyone, it may be that some have been picking up the phone to sources they've got at UEFA, but the likelihood is that the reporting has been based on Tariq's New York Times story. And it's, I say, in danger of kind of stressing the point too much, the press put their own spin on this story without any great regard for the truth or the details. So that obviously everyone, as soon as this story comes out, they all watch each other. The story starts circulating on the media. Everyone picks them up, and it becomes almost a tsunami of news. And everyone assumes, because everyone's reporting it, that it's true, has to be true. Now,
Yeah.
there may be, does it, well, in hindsight, there was some truth in Tariq's story, but the way the media report it starts from, are considering a 1-year ban. And Tariq may have been talking to one person who said, I'm minded to recommend a 1-year ban. Or that person could have said, there's a few of us want to recommend a 1-year ban. Or he could have said, the committee are agreed on a 1-year ban. So again, you've got to try and put some context around that and understand what exactly he's been told. But of course, this gets blown up by the skies of this world and the BBC into UEFA will impose a 1-year ban on Manchester City. So you get from I'm going to recommend a 1-year ban to UEFA will impose a 1-year ban, and that's a typical cycle of sensationalized reporting you get in these sorts of things.
Which leads me on to my next question about the events surrounding City's robust statement. But before I do that and ask you that question about how City have come back at these issues, then it all comes down to the on Thursday there was the referral, and that was basically Yves Leterme saying we're going to it's going to be referred to the adjudicatory chamber. Why was Thursday such a significant day?
Well, if you look at the CFCB's own rules and regulation, their procedural rules, Article 37 is a statute of limitations. And Article 37 says prosecution is barred after 5 years for all breaches of the UEFA club licensing and financial fair play regulations. Now, so it's just 5 years since the original punishment was published. So this is very interesting. So it suggests two things. One is that there's nothing new here, particularly in terms of a new breach of financial fair play when we were supposed to be compliant, because that would have fallen well inside the statute of limitations. If they thought that our last assessment could have been potentially in breach of Ffp regulations, that 5 years doesn't apply. So it clearly applies to the original sanctions that were imposed in May 2014. So that's the first thing. And that leads on to the second thing is to do that. And part of the way City have reacted is that they say they've submitted a comprehensive dossier of information which has been ignored. And of course, if UEFA are going to do anything, they have to have done it last Thursday. Yeah. Because if they'd waited till, I can't remember what the exact, I think it was May the 14th, when the original sanctions, May the 14th, 2014, when the original sanctions were issued. So if they'd waited till May the 15th, then they're out of it. So actually, it also tends to suggest that they've thought, what the hell, we're going to pass this. We're going to have to pass this on, regardless of the strength of our argument or the strength of City's counter arguments. So that's potentially a weak point in their submission. If we look at it in terms of, we've all been watching Line of Duty, haven't we? All know we're all experts on the Crown Prosecution Service and the having to pass the necessary threshold. Now the question is, has the investigatory chamber's work passed the necessary threshold? Because obviously the Crown Prosecution Service wouldn't pick up a case it thought was incomplete. So we'll talk about in terms of outcomes. We'll come back to that, but that's the significance. It's encapsulated in UEFA's own regulations, procedural regulations for the CFCB, and that's why Thursday was significant.
Okay, so on Thursday, we know that the referral was made. So that's when it came into the public domain even further with regards to this. Looks like City are definitely going to be charged with something, and this is going to be referred to the adjudicatory chamber, and they will decide whether there's enough evidence to charge and convict City of any financial wrongdoings. I think they were trying to Panger's New York Times article that appeared last Sunday after the when we won the Premier League, there was talk in there with regards to the specifics as to what City had claimed to have done with the Abu Dhabi United group. So can you just very quickly just talk about what those issues were? And
right, let's try and talk about this quickly then. It probably won't be quick. What seems to be the case here, and there's no specifics, what seems to be the case in what UEFA are claiming is that City misled them in terms of their sponsorship arrangements. Now, if we go back to the original sanctions 5 years ago, one of the conditions was that we would not increase two of the second tier sponsors' sponsorship agreements. We wouldn't increase the revenue being earned. And that suggested, at the time, UEFA thought those were high. Now what we know in the light of Der Spiegel, perhaps we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, is that UEFA did have a problem with two of those sponsorship arrangements for Arba and Etisalat, the UAE mobile telecoms company. What UEFA appear to be, or the path they appear to be going down is, and again, we know this now from the Der Spiegel articles, that if Etihad, say, committed to pay us 50 million a year, Etihad weren't providing the majority of that 50 million. So the figure of 8 million coming from Etihad has been talked about, with 42 million, I can't remember what the exact number was, coming from other alternative sources. And the same appears to apply to Arba Etisalat, that perhaps we were getting something like 15 million from those.
I apologise. Apologies.
We were getting 15 million from those sources, and about 3 million was coming directly from the companies themselves. So what UEFA appear to be insinuating is that we misled them as to the source of their funds, because they appear to be going down the route that these extra amounts are disguised owner investment. Now, let's expand that a little bit to talk about why this is relevant, because one thing that Financial Fair Play did was restricted the amount of money that owners can invest in their clubs. And it's important to make a distinction here. If Sheikh Mansour wanted to build us a completely new stadium costing 500 million, he could put that money in, no question. Doesn't affect Financial Fair Play, because that's a capital sum. Doesn't go towards our revenue at all. We could borrow the money. Doesn't impact our revenue at all. We're just getting money to build something, goes on the balance sheet, and it's nothing to do with Financial Fair Play. What FFP tries to restrict in terms of investment is owners artificially inflating their club's revenues. So that's the profit, making the profit revenues in the profit and loss, and hence the profits and or losses seem better than they are. So there's a number of ways in which owners can legitimately invest or inject revenue. One is the normal provisions of Financial Fair Play allow an owner to invest up to 30 million euros over 3 seasons to write off losses against losses. So that's 10 million euros a season. An owner can put that in cash, and there's no issue. That's all part of Financial Fair Play. They also introduced in 2013, in the first major revision of the rules, a set of conditions whereby if a new ownership took control of a club, they could agree with UEFA to subsidise losses for up to 4 seasons, as long as UEFA agreed to that it was done in advance, and that UEFA had agreed with the club on a plan to achieve break-even within those 4 seasons. So that's another way owners could invest money with the blessing of UEFA. The third way is via sponsorships from related companies.
Yeah.
Now, owners, investors can do that, so they can inject money through their companies, but those sponsorships have got to be seen to be what's regarded as fair market value. So let's take the case of, we'll talk about whether Etihad is a related party in a minute, it gets quite complex, but let's assume Etihad is not a related party to City in any way, or let's assume that Nissan or Hayes were our shirt sponsor. Now, they're not related parties. So the question is, would Nissan pay the same as Etihad? We've not established that Etihad are a related party, but let's assume for the moment they are, for the sake of this conversation. Would Nissan pay the same as Etihad for the same sponsorship arrangement? So shirt, stadium, and the CFO. And if the answer to that is yes, then that's fine. An owner can inject money through a sponsorship as long as it relates to the sort of value that a third party not connected would put up. Now, if we look around the football world, we can see that the sponsorship we're getting now from Etihad is pretty is close, in line with what clubs like Chelsea, Liverpool, United are getting, Arsenal. So we'll talk about the import of that in a minute. Now, what UEFA, say, to come back to the core subject, what UEFA have tried to insinuate is that Etihad are not providing all the finance, as we said, and that someone is providing the bulk of this sponsorship. Now the key is it Sheikh Mansour or is it not? So, because if it's Sheikh Mansour or Abu Dhabi United Group, who are our legal owner, and let's just understand the ownership structure. Abu Dhabi United Group own City Football Group. Sheikh Mansour owns 100% of Abu Dhabi United Group as a named individual, as far as we're aware. CFG is 86% owned by Abu Dhabi United Group and 14% owned by a Chinese consortium. And CFG then owns Manchester City and all the subsidiaries. So we've got this link, Abu Dhabi United Group down to CFG down to Manchester City. So all of those, of course, are related parties because they're all part of the same group. And so if Abu Dhabi United Group have directly provided those funds, they are without any shadow of a doubt a related party. But perhaps there is evidence in the public domain, and if you want me to touch on this, I will. It kind of gets away from this a little bit, but it puts some light on this. Etihad and Emirates and Qatar Airways were all part of a case brought, I think, by the US under their open skies policy.
Yeah.
And this claimed that these airlines were state aided, and state aid is forbidden, as it is within the EU.
Yeah.
And the claim was that made them unfairly competitive because they were the state was subsidising their losses when the other airlines had to be run on a commercial basis.
Yeah.
So to refute that, Etihad engaged a group of consultants called Booz Allen, and Booz Allen prepared a PowerPoint report which summarised Etihad's response to those allegations. And it looked through all the figures, where they got the funding from, where they spent it. And in the where they spent it, there was a thing on sponsorships. And that document was submitted. It's in the public domain. It's all part of the disclosures that were made. And I think the case is still ongoing. I don't think it's been resolved, as far as I know. It said quite plainly on that presentation, Etihad's sponsorship for Manchester City is provided by the Executive Council, provided or underwritten by the Abu Dhabi Executive Council. So what it's saying was the Abu Dhabi government is providing the funding to Etihad to sponsor Manchester City. Now, so that may sound, oh, wow, smoking gun. But the Abu Dhabi government, is the question then is, are they related to Manchester City? Because Sheikh Mansour is a part of that government. Certainly, he's a deputy prime minister of the UAE. But is the Executive Council related party? Now, this is where it gets very complicated. Yeah. And it might be worth at this point, if you think it's worth, talking about related parties.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay.
If people are going to get full understanding of this.
Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate this.
It's worthwhile at least having the background to the argument and discussion.
Yeah. We talked a few minutes ago about related parties. They're allowed related parties, companies owned by owners or owners, are allowed to sponsor clubs as long as it's fair market value. But what is a related party? Now, a lot of people think this is UEFA thing that came in with financial fair play in 2010. It's not. The concept of related parties goes back a lot longer to the world of the wonderful, arcane and exciting world of accountancy. And accounting has all these standards for preparing financial statements in order to ensure that you can compare two sets of financial statements and hope you're looking at them on a like-for-like basis. And of course, it encourages transparency and how to report certain things so people can read the statements and have an understanding of how they've been prepared. And there's a standard called International Accounting Standard 24, which deals with related parties. But the whole concept of related parties goes back to when I was doing my training as an accountant, and we were using quill pens and ledgers in those days. So it's not a new concept. Now, without going too much into the detail, how you describe a related party? UEFA originally, it's interesting actually. UEFA originally adopted the full wording of the International Accounting Standard statement. It's changed.
So literally copy and paste
word for word, comma for comma, full stop for full stop. It's been amended since. This has been interesting. So let's look at what UEFA actually say. A related party is a person or entity that is related to the entity that's preparing its financial statements. So that's called the reporting entity, and in this case, Manchester City is the reporting entity. Then it goes on to say a person or a close member of that person's family, i.e. those family members who may be expected to influence or be influenced by that person in his dealings with the reporting entity. And it mentions children, spouse, domestic partner, spouse's children, or domestic partner's children, and dependents of that person or spouse or domestic partner, is related to a reporting entity if that person has control or joint control over the reporting entity. So if you look at ADUG, ADUG, Sheikh Mansour has control over ADUG, ADUG has control over Manchester City, Abu Dhabi United Group and Manchester City, as we said, are related parties in the technical sense of the word, because Sheikh Mansour effectively controls both. Well, in fact, City is part of a group that consists of ADUG. So has significant influence over the related party. Well, again, same applies to Sheikh Mansour. Is a member of the key management personnel of the reporting entity or parent of the reporting entity. And again, Sheikh Mansour, again. So that's the individual. Sheikh Mansour, I think we can fairly safely establish Sheikh Mansour, Abu Dhabi United Group, Manchester City are all related parties. So Sheikh Mansour is putting money in, or ADUG is putting money in outside into City without telling UEFA. That is probably a breach of FFP. Let's be clear about that. Now, but where it gets more complicated, it talks about other entities. And it says an entity is related to a reporting entity if any of the following conditions apply. And I won't go through them all. The entity, and we're talking about Etihad here now, and the reporting entity, City, are members of the same group. No, they're not.
Yeah.
The entity, the reporting entity, Etihad City, are jointly controlled, or significantly influenced by the same government or the same party. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is a departure from the standard IAS 24 put out by the International Accounting Standards Body. So we're saying Etihad and City, are they jointly controlled, or significantly influenced by the same government or the same party? So does the UAE government significantly influence Manchester City because they own Etihad? Does it? I don't know.
Yeah, don't know.
Does Sheikh Mansour influence Etihad? He's not on the board. He's not a member of the key management personnel. Again, I doubt it very much. So we've got like a little grey, very much a grey area here in who is a related party. And this, I think we've covered that. There's a number of other conditions, one entity has significant influence over the other entity. Do City or Etihad have any influence over each other? No. They're not part of the same joint venture or whatever. And we've already established that Sheikh Mansour does not control Etihad, or does not appear to control Etihad. So we said this is very grey area. And one of the things about related parties is that you have to note in your accounts any instances of transactions with related parties. This is all part of the standard. It's to ensure transparency. So, for example, I used to work for a big company, and the wife of one of the directors of this company had a consultancy which provided services to our company. Now, they were clearly related parties. So in their accounts, the company had to say that we have paid company X, £42,000 for their services over the course of the financial year. And that's to make sure we're not paying them £1 million for like a day's consultancy.
Yeah.
And it works the other way. Are we giving them something for nothing? You could see, if you go back to pre-Shinawatra, you could see it in City's own accounts, because we used to disclose transactions between City and John Wardle, who was the major shareholder and chairman, for purchase of hospitality facilities. And it was made clear that John Wardle purchased hospitality facilities throughout the year, and Dennis Stewart, and these were done at commercial value. Yeah. So we weren't saying, yeah, you have the box and we'll say nothing about it, So that's why related parties are important in accounting terms. Now, our auditors have to be sure that we report all our accounts in a true and fair manner, all our financial statements in a true and fair manner. And that would include disclosing the nature of any transactions with related parties. And we have never disclosed Etihad, Arba, Etisalat as related parties. And our auditors have signed off on that. And if they hadn't, they would have to have said that they had a fundamental disagreement with the management of the key management of the company over this issue. So our auditors believe that these three companies are not related parties. So we're into the accountancy. We're in accountancy mode here. UEFA, I've just said, have put a slightly different spin on it by this clause about jointly controlled or significantly influenced by the same government or the same party. Now, and what we know from the Spiegel articles, from the hacked documents, let's use the correct term, is that there was a disagreement between UEFA's investigators, who were PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and ours, BDO, about whether Etihad, Arba, and Etisalat were related parties. We said they weren't. They said they were. So there's this grey area which has not been tested in any court. So that's why related parties are important. So there's a fundamental disagreement on the one hand between UEFA, who say they are related parties, who believe they're related parties, and City, who don't. And the significance of that is, as we could see from the De Spiegel documents, was that with Etihad, this is interesting, UEFA agreed that the arrangements at the time with Etihad represented fair market value. So even if Etihad was a related party, and people jumped on this at the time in 2014, oh, they've written down the Etihad sponsorship. Well, no, they obviously haven't. Etihad were considered to be, even if they were considered to be a related party, giving us fair market value for what they were paying, getting fair market value for what they were paying in terms of the sponsorship they were getting. So if Sheikh Mansour had provided every single penny from his own pocket or Abu Dhabi United's group pocket of Etihad's sponsorship, that's fine. That sits quite well within FFP regulations. There's no breach there. Where the problem occurred to was that Arba and Etisalat were, UEFA considered, providing sponsorship revenues well in excess of what could be considered fair market value for what value they were getting. And they had an independent consultancy look at these and say they should be written down by about 60%. So maybe to about, I think they were giving us 15 million, maybe to about 7 million, 7 million, something like that, maybe 50%. Now, it didn't matter. And what that means is not that we can't take the money, but we can't declare it for FFP purposes. So if we're declaring a sponsorship of £15 million and fair market value is reckoned to be £7 million, we can still bank that £15 million, but we can only tell UEFA, we can, in our FFP submission, we have to say to UEFA, we've got to knock £8 million off. If this is only worth £7 million. We're supposed to do that. They can check it, of course. So this is what the Der Spiegel articles brought into the light that was hidden. And it takes us back to what I said early on in the broadcast, if you remember, that as part of the conditions, we had agreed not to increase those tier 2 sponsorships. And now it becomes clear why we were asked not to do that. But again, it all comes, just to summarize, it all comes down to whether these are related parties or not. Because if they're not related parties, they can put in as much money as they like. And Etihad can put in much money they like. If they are related parties, they have to be fair market value.
So do you believe that everything is going to fall down on the description and understanding in this grey area of who is going to be classed as a related party or not will be the ultimate outcome of any potential charges or future consequences for Manchester City?
I think that seems to be the main argument here, yeah, because let's just remember, we didn't pass financial fair play. We failed it. Now, had we passed financial fair play and these arrangements were found to be taking place and UEFA found they were in breach of FFP regulations, we could be in very serious trouble.
Yeah.
But we failed financial fair play. So what UEFA might be saying is, well, perhaps you should have failed it by a little bit more. So let's kind of put the whole thing into context here. They're not accusing us of deliberately misleading them in order to pass financial fair play. What they seem to be saying, we don't really know the details. What seems to be coming out of this is they're saying, oh, you should have failed FFP actually by a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
the fine should have been greater, or the money we got back, the 16, 17 million that ended up being a fine should really have been 25 million or
whatever. We don't know this for sure. But I think the key point is around not particularly the FFP. It's around disguised owner investment. So again, I don't want to kind of batter the point till everyone's bored to death of it. If Etihad, we can leave Etihad aside, even if they are a related party, fair market value. But if the other two, Arbar, Etisalat, are related parties, then we have to write it down. If they're not related parties, then we have to be careful. UEFA have to prove that, and this is where this is going. UEFA have to show that this is in fact disguised owner investment, and that is absolutely not necessarily the fact.
Very difficult.
And this is where it gets interesting, because if City have been, well, one of the emails that's been highlighted, and I can't remember the exact text of the email, but it said something like, it is agreed that Etihad will provide 8 million. His Highness will ensure that in Highness ADUG will make arrangements to provide the rest of the alternative arrangements to provide the rest of the finance.
But who is His Highness?
The question is, who is His Highness? Let's go on to that in a minute. Now, let's imagine a situation where you're City's accountant, financial director, and you get a check from Etihad for 8 million. You get a check from Abu Dhabi United Group for 42 million. You bank those two checks. There's an audit trail there. UEFA look at that and say, hang on, you had a receipt from Abu Dhabi United Group for 42 million. Add that to the 8 million, that's your 50 million you're declaring as Etihad. We would have been very stupid to do that. Very, very stupid indeed. Because that's a clear audit trail, clear proof that basically we've had disguised owner investment. And I'm not good. If you've done that, then they're in the wrong. But City have been so clever about the way they've set everything up. Let's assume they've been careful about how they've done this as well. So if someone gives Etihad a check for 42 million, and we don't know who that might have been, and Etihad give us a check for 50 million, and Arbar, Etisalat give us checks for 15 million, or won't be checked, there'll be bank transfers, then you've got to be able to prove what was behind that 50 million. And all they seem to have is the email, a vaguely worded email that says His Highness, and people who know Abu Dhabi say, if anyone ever refers to His Highness without any qualification of a name, His Highness Sheikh Mansour, His Highness Sheikh whatever. His Highness without any qualification is His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, or as they call him, Sheikh MBZ, and he's the Emir of Abu Dhabi, and he's the guy he's the top man, he's the top dog, he is His Highness. So the implication is that email was referring to Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, not Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed. And alternative arrangements could be the Executive Council. As we said earlier, we know Etihad have already admitted the Executive Council have been providing funding for Etihad. So that's the Executive Council. So then UEFA have got two problems. They've got to prove that Etihad got that funding from somewhere else, and all they've got is an email to say that. They've also got to prove that even if they can find it where it came from, that it came from a related party. And so we come back to this issue of related party. Now, UEFA, of course, have no jurisdiction over Etihad. They have no jurisdiction over Abu Dhabi United Group. They're not football clubs. They're not UEFA licensees. They're nothing to do with UEFA. They're just sponsors of one of their licensed clubs. So they can't go to Etihad and say, open your books, we want to see where that 40 million came from.
Yeah.
So it's a question of proofs, balance of probabilities, and this, I suspect, is the core issue here. This is what's going to be tested.
Well, wonderful explanation there, Colin. Thank you very much for that. Which leads me on to, obviously, we've given you the background as to what we think is the core issues in the referral to the CFCB's adjudicatory chamber. The club came out and made a statement, and the statements this week that the club's come out with, and I'm sure you're going to bring it up on screen exactly what they said word for word.
I've got it in front of me.
I've got a bit of it, but I haven't got it the full a lot because obviously you're on my laptop, so I can't bring it up. Is a slight change in tone and veracity in the wording and things and the language that they use compared to what they've said in the past. So if you want to read it out, what was City's initial response to this? Okay,
the City's response, and I'll read it word for word. Manchester City Football Club is disappointed but regrettably not surprised by the sudden announcement of the referral to be made by the CFCB Investigative Chamber Chief Investigator Yves Leterme. And I think that's the first sentence. So the key word, well, there's a few key words in there. Disappointed but regrettably not surprised. I think sudden is another key word.
And also using his name.
Yes, yeah. So let's go through the statement first, then perhaps we'll take it. The leaks to the media over the past week are indicative of the process that have been overseen by Monsieur Leterme. Manchester City is entirely confident of a positive outcome when the matter is considered by an independent judicial body. The accusation of financial irregularities remains entirely false, and the CFCB IC referral ignores a comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence provided by Manchester City to the Chamber. The decision contains mistakes, misinterpretations, and confusions fundamentally born out of a basic lack of due process, and there remain significant unresolved matters raised by Manchester City FC as part of what the club has found to be a wholly unsatisfactory, curtailed and hostile process. So that's the club statement, and it's very much on the front foot, as you say, very much on the offensive compared to the fairly bland, the club will make no comment, or the club regards this as an organised attempt to discredit our good name, blah, blah, blah. So if we go through it kind of line by line, we talked about sudden announcement, and I think we understand now why it's sudden, because they all of a sudden realised it was a 5-year deadline. The leaks to the media, clearly the club made known its position on that you talked about the confidentiality. The club referenced in a separate statement the agreement to remain silent on this, and someone within the CFCB investigatory chamber has broken that agreement. Are indicative of the process. So again, there's a very much an implied slight on Monsieur Leterme over his management of this. Manchester City is entirely confident of a positive outcome when the matter is considered by an independent judicial body. Now, I think it's quite clear that what they're referring to is the Court for Arbitration in Sport.
CAS.
CAS. And we'll come to that in a minute. But this, I think, is going to be quite interesting. The accusation of financial irregularities remains entirely false. Now, you could not get financial irregularities. What do they mean by that? But you cannot get more, more comprehensive, more, putting your cards on the table as entirely false.
Well, this is one of the big things that certainly a lot of the journalists, when we spoke to journalists and things like that, they turned around and said they've never denied it. That's the thing. They've never denied it. Well, they certainly have now.
They have now, yeah. So, again, the referral ignores a comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence, which, again, another very strong statement provided by City to the investigatory chamber. So, again, there's this.
Well, that was over 100 pages, wasn't it? They gave.
And City are claiming they've not looked at that. And again, we know about this 5-year statute of limitations. So, again, City seem to be inferring that they provided all this evidence, and UEFA are basically, in fact, but we should make the point that the investigatory chamber and the adjudicatory chamber are not UEFA functionaries. They are supposedly independent bodies. We might talk about how independent Rick Parry is in a minute, mind you. But, it's almost as though you go into court, you're the defendant in a very serious and complex case. And the judge kind of looks at the evidence and says, oh, yeah, this case is going to take about 4 weeks, but I'm on holiday on Friday. So let's just let's have a quick summary and we'll go to the verdict.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the kind of analogy. So again, they go on to say mistakes, misrepresentations, confusions, basic lack of due process, which is a key phrase, and there remain significant unresolved matters. So again, they use the word curtailed. So again, there's this whole inference that the process has been rushed through to try and meet a deadline, which otherwise would have rendered any case UEFA had completely outside statute.
Yeah.
So again, it's a very strong statement. The club had made it clear, and it was made clear in the Der Spiegel article that the club were prepared to go to town over this. Now you have to look at this perhaps in the context of certainly reading between the lines of the Der Spiegel disclosures. There was a lot of extreme. UEFA taking a very extreme position on one hand, City taking a very extreme position. UEFA saying, we'll do you. City saying, we'll see you in court. They sort of came together in the middle and came up with a set of sanctions, which I've always maintained didn't really hurt City that much. Enabled UEFA to show that FFP had a little bit of teeth, didn't fall at the first hurdle. So everyone came away 75% happy, maybe, rather than 100% miserable. So again, you've got to put this in the context of, is there a lot of posturing going on here? So, does City really mean this? Or are they prepared to go press the red button and launch the missiles? Or is it trying to influence the adjudicatory chamber?
Yeah.
Now, I think there's some key things here. We won't know. And the people are saying, will we know before the cup final? No, we won't. It's unlikely we'll know the decision of the adjudicatory chamber before the start of next season, because these things typically take many weeks, 2-3 months maybe. So we're not going to be hit with a decision that we're going to be banned from Europe for 5 years on tomorrow morning. So let's kind of put that one aside for the moment. Now, the words due process are important here, because we talked about CAS, the Court for Arbitration in Sport. If and when the adjudicatory chamber hand down a decision, and we don't know what the decision will be, that decision could be, we don't feel that the IC has made its case. Or they could accept the IC's case and issue a ban. We will then, unless we're cleared, obviously, we will then take our case to CAS. And CAS is an independent body, which is not part of UEFA, but is part of the process. Now, CAS is very keen on due process. CAS doesn't rule on points of law, but it's a bit more like an ombudsman. they have to be sure that the process has been followed correctly and the right technicalities observed. So they can say UEFA or CFCB have not followed the due process here. They've not looked at the evidence.
They can also go the opposite way as well by saying you've recommended 1 year ban. We actually think it should be 2 years.
No, I don't think CAS can do that. I'm not sure that they can say a punishment is.
Or is that the
adjudicatory chamber? Yeah. So just to make this clear, the IC have passed a recommendation to the AC because they don't have the power to impose a ban. So they're like the magistrates' court. Yeah. They can impose a fine. They can impose a suspended 6-month sentence or up to a 6-month sentence, but they can't put anyone away for life. The AC have to make that decision. So the AC will have to examine the evidence, understand, and City have to be involved in that case. It's not a closed discussion. City should be involved in that. And it may be that the adjudicator chamber, having looked at it, they may say, yeah, we think a 3-year ban is more appropriate, or this case is not proven. If they do say, if we come out of it with a punishment, City will take it to CAS, or almost certainly take it to CAS. And CAS is very hot on due process. So have UEFA or whichever body is involved, because it doesn't just cover football, follow their own processes. And City seem to be implying that
they haven't.
At this point, they haven't, because they've not listened to the evidence. They've not read the evidence. They've rushed this through to hit the statute of limitations. So, if regardless of the strength of UEFA's case against City or the CFCB's case against City, if CAS feels that they haven't followed the process properly, they could well throw any punishment out, any ruling out. I don't think they can't increase it. They can either say, yeah, the punishment is fair, due process has been followed, goodbye, case closed. In theory, CAS, we can't then appeal to a legal court over that ruling. But there's nothing to stop us taking the whole concept of the legality of financial fair play to court. That is a separate issue. And that case has been rumbling on. That's been brought by Jean-Louis Dupont. Now, there's again, where you've got to be careful about what journalists tell you. Some journalists will say that case was thrown out. Well, it wasn't thrown out because the argument is about who has the jurisdiction to hear that case. And just to quickly say, it started off in the Belgian court because Dupont is Belgian, and it was then the Belgian court said we can't rule. It's a European law matter. We can't rule of it. It has to go to the ECJ. The ECJ said no. This is a local thing. It's brought by a Belgian lawyer with his plaintiffs. And the case has got to be heard through Belgium. It got heard through Belgium, and Belgium then said, "Well, no, we're not competent to hear it. Because it affects UEFA. UEFA are domiciled in Switzerland. Probably should be heard in the court relevant to the domicile of the party you're complaining about." So this is still very much all in the air. And the other thing about Dupont's case is one of the remarks that the judges have made, or one of the legal points, is that you have to be directly affected by the impacts of financial fair play. So Dupont obviously is not directly affected. What he's got a couple of fan groups, and City are one of those. I think PSG are the other, and an agent, Striani, to be co-plaintiffs in that case. But even then, you could argue, are City fans directly impacted by us being fined under financial fair play? Again, it's an arguable point. If City take that case, if we are banned, if we lose revenue, potentially could be losing revenue through a ban from European competition, we then are directly affected by FFP. So that removes that potential legal barrier, and we can take the case directly either in a UK or a Swiss court, and presumably hear the case legal. And that, as we all know, could go on for years and years and years. So the adjudicator chamber, I think, have got to take into account not just the evidence, the process, but what happens if we do this? Are we lighting the fuse that blows up the bomb under our own table? Yeah,
absolutely. And will this potentially end FFP and people's jobs and things like that in Switzerland, and you name it. But and any future potential lawsuits against them, and so finally. Just briefly before we finish, so what are your gut feelings of what's going to happen next, and a timeline of, because obviously people on Twitter keep constantly saying, oh, so we could be out of the Champions League next year, and we keep going back to them saying, I doubt it'll be heard before then, we'll be in the competition. But reading through the rules of Cfcb, they can actually remove a team directly from a competition. So if there was a ruling, they have the opportunity to say, right, even if you're in group stage, whatever, we're removing you. Whether they do that, I don't know. But
I don't think they would. I really don't think they would do that. So I really don't think there's any danger of us being not in next season's Champions League in pot 1, where we belong.
Yeah. So we know nothing is going to happen for next season's Champions League campaign.
I think we can be 99% certain.
Almost certain.
Yeah, 99% certain we will be playing in next season's Champions League. Though, I dread to think some of the refs we will get playing those games. But it would be fun if we got a ban and then won it, wouldn't it? So
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we won it and then got banned?
Yes. So that would be quite funny. So I think they have to give us, we'd have to have that decision is likely to be announced before the start of next season. Maybe take even longer. As you say, they could remove us, but I don't think they would do that. So, and in that time, we've got time to appeal to CAS or do anything else we might want to do. So there's a number of potential outcomes here, and we talked about threat and bluster on both sides. Because let's be honest, this has all been fought out in the glare of the media, and City can use that as much to their favour as UEFA, the CFCB, can use it to theirs. So there's a number of outcomes. The adjudicator chamber could throw the case out completely. They could they could impose a punishment but not take up the IC's recommendation. So the ban could be suspended, for example. They could follow the IC's recommendation. They could increase the IC's recommendation. So we don't know what's going to come out of that, and there will be discussion. One possibility, and this is my thought, and we're going back to this related parties issue. And again, sorry to kind of keep hitting this nail on the head till the nail is bent out of shape. But as we said, if you're a related party, an owner can put in as much as they like as long as it's fair value. If you're not a related party, then it's everything's open. So City's best for me. I'm not saying this is anything City have thought of or would consider. For me, looking at the easy way out, City's best option would be to say, okay, because we said it's a very grey area. Sheikh Mansour is the titular legal owner of Manchester City, not the Abu Dhabi government. Are the Abu Dhabi government a related party in the sense of the related party regulation within FFP to Sheikh Mansour and Manchester City? Again, that would all have to be tested in court. The easiest thing might be for City to say, okay, we'll accept, for the sake of this, we don't agree, but we'll accept that they are related parties. So what's the outcome there? The outcome is that UEFA have already said, although it was the old deal, but I can't see any issues with the new one, the latest one. UEFA could say, yeah, Etihad, fine. That's fair value. For what they get, it's fair value. So we've no issue with that one. Doesn't matter who provides the funds. That takes that off the table, as we said earlier. And again, as we said earlier, they could then say, well, we don't think that £15 million is fair value for Alba and Etisalat. We think that £7 million is fair value, or £6 million, whatever figure they agree. So you have to write down, from an FFP point of view, you have to write down 9 million or 8 million or whatever figure. Is that going to impact us? The answer is no. Almost certainly not. Because we're reporting profits around the 10 million range. We can add probably about 20 million back to that. So for FFP purposes, we're reporting profits about 30 million. There's probably some other companies have got to come into the equation, because we City Football Services, City Football Marketing, City Football Services, they're companies that fall within the reporting parameter for financial fair play. Their losses are not huge. We could probably next season our profits go up tremendously, because there's another boost from the Premier League, and we've got the Puma stuff kicking in, and so we could probably safely say, okay, from now on we'll regard them as related parties, and we'll knock off whatever you consider to be fair value, but you can't question the source. Then the other side of the argument is UEFA can't question the source of funds.
Yeah,
and that to me is the clever, simple way out. Of course, the other way out is to take it, if we do get punished, is to take it to CAS and fight that on due process and technicalities, which from what we've seen, it's very early to say in the process, we don't really know enough. From what we've seen and what we've seen of the history of CAS, City may have a fighting chance of winning that. But for me, the easiest, simplest way out of it is City accept that they're related parties. There's no punishment. We won't get punished for that. It kills everything nicely. We start reporting them in our accounts,
which I think they want to do as a this a public persona and image that they want to come across. I don't think they really want to come across as this hard hitting sort of government backed whatever. I think they want to come to some agreement like they did last time.
I think that is potentially very much the case. Now, I don't have any inside knowledge of that, but that's if I was Khaldun, well, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, but I'd be doing something important. But that is the path I would take. It's a simple outcome. It resolves the issues. It clears City's it doesn't quite clear City's name, but there's two opposing views by two sets of auditors, both of whom are professionally held in they're at the top of their profession. It's a subjective thing, so you can't say City deliberately set out to willfully mislead anyone. And it kind of there are always people who say City, financial doping, oil money, all the usual rubbish. What did Miguel Delaney call us? The most transparent. I can't remember what the exact words he used, but the biggest financial transformation in history or something, which ignores United being taken from being dazed from bankruptcy by Mr. Gibson, and Liverpool being staved on the steps of the Crown Court by FSG, basically, before they went to administration.
Yeah, we won't get into the.
We won't get into that.
We won't get into Standard Chartered sort of. Fine.
Yeah. No, that's not. It's not relevant. It's not relevant to us. I was just using that an example. But that if I was City, and I suspect, as you said, what we saw in 2014 was two sides starting from quite extreme positions, threats, bluster, you do this, we'll do that, to a compromise.
Yeah.
I don't know whether will City be prepared to go the whole hog this time. I don't know. But to me, the easy compromise is to say, okay, our auditors said that we believe, and our auditors backed us. You believe this, and your auditors back you. We'll accept what you say for the sake of peace.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, but that's where this may go. But it may go all the way to court. I don't know.
Could do. So listen, that brings us to the end of our sort of overview of everything that's happened sort of lately, the last sort of 6 days, and Colin's kindly come on Man City Fan TV and give a little bit of background to FFP and what happened in 2014, and obviously his thoughts and opinions and ideas on what happened when the new information came out in the New York Times article on Sunday night, and how the press have basically jumped all over this. And then obviously, it gave you some wonderful background as to related parties, and that's where the crux of the potential issue could come from.
Actually, there's just one thing I slightly forgot to mention, which is another potential outcome. UEFA could be letting this go to CAS, knowing that CAS will rule against them, of course. So they can say, well, we've done our job. We recommended a ban, but we were, it was thrown out of court.
Yeah, yeah.
What else could we do?
Yeah,
so saving face. So that is potentially another, not probable outcome, but another easily foreseeable outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Then they can say we did everything we possibly could. It was cast that out the water.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
So that doesn't help City case really.
No, it doesn't. But listen, Colin Savage, I want to say an absolutely massive thank you for coming on. And people, like I said, we did the video because people have been asking questions, a lot of questions on social media, saying, I wish I could understand a little bit more about where this has come from, the background to it, the intricacies of where the real problems lie within this referral by the investigatory chamber to the CFCB's adjudicatory chamber and what could happen next. And Colin's just gone into some wonderful detail for you there. I'm sure you'll probably still have questions, but don't forget, if you have got questions, post them below the video. And at some point when Colin's free and his family have gone back to the States again, and maybe he could take the time to answer any specific questions that maybe wasn't covered, but I'm not sure what are the questions you could possibly ask. But anyway, I just want to say a massive thank you to Colin. If you want to follow Colin on Twitter, it's @PressSwitchBlue. Go over and have a chat with Colin. But Colin, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. I mean, thanks for giving me the platform to get this across. But I think it is important when you see City fans kind of panicking and coming up with all sorts of things. I think it's important for us to be able to, all right, we may be being a little bit perhaps protective, but I think I'm not trying to protect the club here. I'm trying to get across what I believe is the process, what's happened so far, what's likely to happen in the future, without trying to gloss over any of the potential issues.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Colin, thank you very much. Don't forget, guys, subscribe to the channel, click notification, give it a thumbs up if you like the video. Like I said, you can always comment if there's something else in particular you want to ask that you believe we haven't somehow covered on this particular video, then just post a comment below the video. But anyway, this is Andy from Man City Fan TV. Take care, and we'll see you soon.